Hello and welcome to another edition of Morning Hoops. I am Anthony Denu. You can find me on Twitter at Anthony Denu, and I am joined, as usual, with Kyle McKeown.
Yo, what up?
Kyle, where can they find you on Twitter and all
I'm
the
sorry.
other
I was
wonderful
just
places?
excited to hang out with you. I wasn't even
Yeah,
worried
yeah.
about the show.
This is fun.
You can find me on Twitter at RotoKyleNBA. Thanks, Anthony.
Yeah, so, we had a pretty big weekend in the NBA. We have 5 games on Sunday. And before we get to those games, we want to talk about a little bit of news. And there's been a lot of talk, really, the last few years about how to change the NBA for the better, things to get rid of, such as the playoff format or back-to-backs. And we actually had some news really coming out earlier today. Is that right, about potential changes?
This is on Saturday. It was Adrian Wojnarowski. Usually when you see rumors about different changes to the league structure or a potential midseason tournament or changes to how the postseason is going to play out, maybe a play-in tournament for the 7th, 8th, 9th, and 10th seeds or teams at that time of the league or at that time of the season, it always just seemed like rumors. It was just fan chatter. But now Adrian Wojnarowski is tweeting and sharing news reports about this being an actual thing that the league is in serious discussions to talk about. They're talking about having it so that they'll reseed the 4 conference finalists, so the 4 final teams could get reseeded. You could have the Los Angeles Clippers and the Los Angeles Lakers playing each other in the finals. You can have 2 Eastern Conference teams playing each other in the finals. So it's an interesting idea in that respect, because then you can hopefully get the 2 best teams in the finals and not, maybe a mediocre challenger to a more dominant team. Other things that they're talking about doing is having a 30-team in-season tournament, and then that postseason play-in that I already touched on. And they're also talking about bringing the total number of games down from 82 to 78, which would hopefully lead to less of this load management crap that we see from guys like Kawhi Leonard. So a lot of little interesting things, and wouldn't go into effect next year if it all gets approved, but 2 seasons from now is when they would see that. And I think a lot of the ideas make sense. I like the play-in tournament because then you have more teams saying to themselves, okay, we don't have to play to be the 8th best team at the end of the season. We just have to play to at least be the 10th best team. So it also opens up the door to those guys that are on that fringe of being able to compete for the playoffs, to maybe make a trade before the trade deadline, to add another piece, to maybe make a last ditch run towards getting into that 10th spot. So I think it's interesting from that aspect.
I think there's a lot of things to look at. Going down to 64 games. So we've seen something similar twice with lockouts in the 99 season.
64?
I thought I saw 64. I'm sorry.
No,
that might have been another fan. That might have been another.
Yeah, no. 64 would be brutal.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I'm taking somebody else's tweet as making it reality, basically, is what's going on.
I'm just glad that you were wrong, because if it was really 64 games, then that would be the most egregious thing.
What's a good number? Do you like back-to-backs?
No, I don't think there should be back-to-backs, just because I'm not sure that it's the best thing for. Look, I'm not sure it's like the older or the more we get into the analytics of what it means to keep players healthy, we know that maybe it's not smart to wear helmets now, because then you give this false sense of security and then you hit people harder, and then that rattles the brain inside, and that causes, issues in that regard. Maybe there's other issues in regard to just overuse. So playing players on back-to-backs on low rest, especially if they're traveling, maybe you just make sure that you never have a back-to-back that's on the
Multiple
road
cities.
with traveling, things like that. So, or if you're really having these players wear these little electronic monitors that have their rest and their speed and all these different things tracked, and you do know when they're too tired to be out there doing something, then maybe that's more of an open debate, and maybe it's something where it just says, like, look, if the data says you're too tired to play because you might be putting yourself at risk of injury, you're patently not allowed to play in that game. So I don't know. I don't know what the best things to do is. I also don't know that I want to rely on technology to determine what, players want to do. If somebody wants to play tired, if somebody wants to go out the night before and party in Miami because it's their first time there and they're a 19-year-old kid, then whatever, man. So ultimately, I think a lot of the changes they're talking about, though, are interesting. I like the idea of a midseason tournament if it's done the right way, if it finds a proper way to engage the fans. Because ultimately, if it's just there and it's not, and it doesn't have any levity to it, then what's the purpose? But I think if you're talking about introducing something like this, I'm sure that the NBA has enough incentives built in through different awards that you give to the team, or different cash incentives, most likely to the players, to the coaches, I believe Wojnarowski mentioned. So there's hopefully it's going to build enough intrigue, and ultimately I hadn't seen all the details of the proposal to know this, but I would expect that those games that they play in that tournament would in some way be applied to their season total. I would hope it would in some respect.
I'm not finding the purpose, I guess, yet of a mid-season tournament. I didn't hear that portion.
I think it's just to drum up interest, because it's like the doldrums of the NBA season is essentially the explanation, and this would take place from like throughout the holidays, so from Thanksgiving until Christmas. So maybe it's something that's like it's a 30-team single elimination tournament. It's almost like a college style type of thing where, man, I wonder if they're playing their regular schedule and then this is all just mixed in with it. Like certain games are designated as part of the tournament. That'd be super interesting too. Huh. I don't know.
There's a lot to unload with this, and I'm sure more will unravel as time goes on, hopefully soon.
And we're hearing a lot this week that there's the ratings are down in certain respects for the NBA. I don't know, man. Sometimes that stuff just, I don't know what to believe, because the ratings in what respect? Does it really take into account all of the interest that people have through Twitter and stuff like that? Like, engagement with the league is engagement with the league, whether or not you're actively watching games every single night. A lot of people may not be sitting down in their house to watch games, but they're constantly on their phones engaging over Twitter and things like that. So I just don't know that the traditional way to gauge ratings, and I know that there are avenues for metrics to be measured in online engagement, but I don't know. I'm just kind of not buying some of the narratives out there that there's a lack of interest in the NBA this season. That what is it? Is it what, because of the lack of super teams? Because the Lakers and the Clippers are pretty much playing like super teams right now.
No, I think there's a ton of entertainment, but while football season, it will always be second banana, and things will pick up once again after college football is done on Saturdays, and we start getting like some ABC matinee games, and then eventually football is done in the professional level, and you get more fun Sunday slates. And I mean, people just start talking about it more and more as we get closer to the playoffs. That's the thing right now, is so much doesn't matter in the regular season, and that's how a lot of casual fans or borderline fans who do love football but don't really get into the NBA until late April, early May. It's what are things that are going to like bring them into basketball earlier in the season.
Well, we had a couple of guys who were gunning at each other during the games today, so I suppose we should probably move on and talk about that, because those are the more interesting things to discuss about the NBA season, and that's probably what's going to actually get people interested in the league is guys like Luka Doncic going out and putting up the great games that they're putting up.
Yeah, exactly. He's like the stud of the league in a lot of ways right now, or the prettiest girl at the dance. So he and his team, the Mavericks, won 123 over the Houston Rockets, one of the biggest games, our most anticipated games really that we've had. And this was a pretty good showing again from Luka. You want to take it over and with the box score?
Yeah, I mean, Luka ended up putting up 41 points, 6 rebounds, 10 assists, 2 steals, 1 block, 5 of 14 from three-point land, 15 of 29 from the field, 6 of 8 from free throw line in 34 minutes. He's doing it all. The way he plays out there is a hybrid of Harden and LeBron in regards to how he facilitates, yet how he also dominates in his ability to get to the rack, draw fouls, also shoot from deep and extend the floor, or have the gravity to command and open up shots for other players. So it's just continues to be amazing to see what Doncic is able to do already in just the start of his second season in the NBA. And he has made the comments that it's easier to score in the NBA than it is over in Europe, because of the fact that over in Europe, I don't believe they have the 3-second call. It's you can stand down there longer underneath the hoop. So it's kind of like college in the respect that, like, there's just less spacing. You can't hang out in the paint in the NBA. It's against the rules. So,
Right.
which that makes sense, but it's also just insane to see how efficient he's been with shooting the ball so far this season, and the fact that right now, if you're projecting out what Luka's going to do the rest of this season, he's probably going to finish the year averaging a 30-point triple-double, and that's bonkers, because then where does it go from here? How does he get better as he gets older?
That's a great question. I guess I don't know how you get better. I mean, there's only 2 players ever that have done the 30-point triple-double for an entire season. I mean, we saw Westbrook do it not too long ago, and then of course Oscar Robertson, the first. I believe it was 1962. He was only in his second or third year in the NBA.
So the Dallas Mavericks are a lock for the playoffs now, right? They've started off 11-5. You think they're a lock?
Yeah, I do. I think there's still some changes to the rotation. I think there's a trade maybe on the way at some point that makes the front court situation. I guess I'm not a big Dwight Powell guy. I guess let's put it that way. And just look at the plus minuses tonight. Everyone in the starting lineup was between a plus 12 and a plus 32. The plus 32 being Porzingis, and Dwight Powell minus 15. I know you're not huge on plus minus, but sometimes I like to use that for players I don't like when they don't play well.
Well, no, you can definitely use it as a talking point, and that's fine. And it's fun to use as a point of reference for how guys performed in a particular game, but it's also not necessarily, it's not going to tell the whole story. So,
right.
And sometimes it can be super deceptive. Kristaps Porzingis put up 23 points, 13 rebounds, 3 assists, 2 steals, 1 block, 2 of 5 from three-point land, 9 of 17 overall. Nice, efficient game from him. Played 34 minutes. I think he's going to continue to round into form and continue to play better as he gets more into game shape after being off for 18 months. So exciting to see Porzingis playing so well already. Dorian Finney-Smith he's got a secure role in the starting lineup right now. It seems like for the Mavericks, it's him, Doncic, and Porzingis that are kind of locked in. We've seen with Seth Curry being out the last 2 games with an illness. Curry was back this game, but did not go back into the starting lineup. So they left Tim Hardaway in the starting lineup, and Hardaway played his season high 38 minutes, put up 31 points, 4 rebounds, 5 assists, 2 steals, 5 of 11 from three-point land, was just playing great tonight. Unfortunately, you were touching on it a little bit, Anthony. This Dallas Mavericks, they just run such a different rotation from night to night as needed. They're willing to play the matchup game with their starting lineup beyond Kristaps, beyond Luka. In most respects, as I said though before, Dorian Finney-Smith is kind of locking in that wing defender role for them to be able to match up with those bigger wings, the LeBrons, the well, probably even the Harden in this case here. So, it's. I just don't know that we can trust Tim Hardaway to continue to have big scoring games here for the Mavericks, but kudos to him for playing out on Sunday.
Yeah, he had a heck of a game. Let's move on to the Rockets. Of course, there's so many comparisons right now between Doncic and Harden, and the way they can control a game offensively. You threw LeBron in there as well, is just really the top 3 with the ball in their hands in terms of inside-outside threats. Giannis, of course, as that 3-point develops, he's going to be right. He's right up there with anybody as well. But Harden had 32 points, 11 assists, 9 rebounds. He did have 6 turnovers, so him and Luka, I think, both had 6 turnovers in the game. 2 of 15 from beyond the arc. Sometimes that tells the story with Harden.
Yeah, it's funny though that you look at a Harden line of 32, 9, and 11, and you're just like, that's kind of normal, or that might even be a little disappointing from him, because you're used to seeing the more gaudy, close to 40 points almost every night. Probably the most intriguing line from the Rockets game, or from the group of guys there, is Clint Capella putting up 22 rebounds. This was the 5th time, I believe, in the last 6 games that he
6 out of 7.
6 out of 7 that he went with 20 rebounds or more. Wow.
And the one time that he missed it, I think, was Friday against the Clippers, and he had 19 in that game.
And this one was a Barbara Walters with the 2020, so with 21 points scored. So just oh man, he's been playing wonderful. That's meant less rebounds for Westbrook recently, but that's fine. The fact that Capella's showing out is wonderful to see. Daniel House was back in action. He missed the previous game with a shoulder issue, but was able to return to the lineup. Back starting, played 35 minutes, 16 points, 2 rebounds, 1 steal, 3 of 8 from 3-point land. And House is super important to this Rockets team as far as being a legitimate contender deeper into the playoffs. They need someone in that role there, given their lack of depth on the bench at the wing.
Rockets. Let's see here. So 11-6 on the season. The Mavericks, the Rockets, the Jazz. You got a bunch of teams that are kind of fighting for like one of the top 4 seeds. So that would be first home court advantage in the first round. I know we're months away, but taking a look at the standings, do you see the Mavericks holding down a top 4 seed right now? They are at number 4 behind the Lakers, Nuggets, and Clippers.
Holding down a top 4 seed.
That's home. Yeah, it would be home court in the
it's
first.
Definitely possible. I actually think the Mavericks are better than what they've played so far. So, or they have a higher ceiling due to the fact that Kristaps still isn't at peak Kristaps, and I don't think that the rotations that we've seen from the Mavericks have actually been their best possible rotations. I think we do need to see different lineups out there from them. So, yeah, I do think Dallas Mavericks are better than the Houston Rockets. I don't know if they're actually going to be better than the Utah Jazz. So I would expect them to be in one of that 4 or 5 spot when the season ends. It's crazy.
That's fair. Yeah. I mean, if that does end up being a matchup in the first round of the 4-5, either one being the home court team, I mean, the Rockets just have insane amounts of playoff experience compared to the Mavericks as it currently stands.
For sure.
Should we move on to the next game of the day?
Yes, sir.
All right. So we just had a Texas matchup. Now we've got a New York matchup. The Brooklyn Nets beating the New York Knicks 103-101. A close game. And you want to take us down on the box score here? When I look at this, I saw 30 points and 13 of 14 at the free throw line for Spencer Dinwiddie.
Yep, the Nets are still playing with Kyrie Irving, and he'll be out a couple more games. So Spencer Dinwiddie is going to continue to carry a big load there as a starting point guard. They don't really have a backup point guard. I guess you could say that Iman Shumpert can take those duties a little bit. Janan Musa can take those duties a little bit. But with Karis LeVert also out, there really is a lot of shots available, a lot of facilitation duties available for Spencer Dinwiddie, and he's using it and he's looking good. It's nice to see the Nets being able to tread water, at least with Kyrie being out and with Karis LeVert being out. Now it's not necessarily a surprise to see them be better than the New York Knicks, though.
No, it shouldn't surprise anyone. Right now, moving over to the Knicks side, they're 4-13 on the season. They are the worst team in the Eastern Conference. Not the worst team in the league, though. The Warriors only have 3 wins as it currently stands. But Knicks, number 15 out of 15 in the Eastern Conference. As we said, they lost by 2 tonight. What did you like from the Knicks?
You've got to give Marcus Morris Sr. props for the fact that he continues to score at a good clip for the Knicks, that he continues to play a big role for them. He was 7 of 8 from 3-point land, which was just nuts, and he was banging. It was fun to watch. You know, anytime a guy is lights out like that, regardless of whether you're a fan of their game or not, you gotta say woohoo a little bit and just enjoy the night. Morris was getting a few extra shots even here with the fact that RJ Barrett sat out the game due to an illness. Kevin Knox got a spot start at shooting guard, but only played 18 minutes. Looks like he dealt with a little bit of foul trouble. And also we saw Wayne Ellington get hot off the bench for the Knicks from 3-point land, hitting 4 of 7 there. So that stole a few minutes from Kevin Knox as well. So it's this Knicks team is so bizarre because you look at the guys that I would value as far as who they should be developing, who they should be giving the most shots to, and it would tell me I want Mitchell Robinson in the starting lineup, who he came off the bench behind Taj Gibson again. Robinson played 19 minutes, put up 6 points, 3 blocks. 3 blocks is the interesting thing, the thing that you track the most about Mitchell Robinson, trying to discern how much of an impact he's making on the defensive side of the ball. And the fact that Mitchell Robinson is like the best shot blocker out on the perimeter too. It frustrates me to no end that we don't see him play more, because it's not even that you can put him at center, but like just put him out there to be a defensive chaos guy. Have him be a Dennis Rodman type guy. You don't have to limit him to the conception that he's only a center and that's the only place you can play him on the court.
Yeah.
So
no, I understand. It's very frustrating. I guess we're all still trying to figure out the idea behind these signings, and it will make more sense if someone like Gibson or Morris gets traded at some point during the season.
Well, one last thought about the Knicks is we've seen Julius Randle struggle to certain degrees this season. I mean, we say struggle, but he had 15, 8, and 4 on Sunday, and 8 rebounds, 4 assists from a power forward. It's pretty good. I mean, that's especially in today's stretch them out power forward NBA. And you know, they bring in Julius Randle. They make him their highest paid player in regard to their, you know, your expectations of who they're going to build around. And then they surround him with a bunch of non-shooters when Julius Randle is himself a ball handling slasher who's going to help facilitate and use the fact that he has guys around him to get the ball up to other players and use his drives to open the floor for other players or to draw in the defense. And then you don't put that kind of team around Randle, and it's just like, well, what do you expect? You expect him to fly when you're cutting, you're tying down his wings. It's ridiculous. So, anyways, I don't know how much more there is to say about this game, though.
Now let's move on to the Kings and the Wizards. The Kings winning this one in DC, 113-106. What do you got for me on this one?
Rashawn Holmes had a really nice game for the Kings, and I think you're encouraged by the fact that they've actually been winning since he stepped into the starting lineup over Dwayne Dedmon. Or when you look through their game log, you can see a lot more wins after Rashawn Holmes stepped into a bigger role on this team. So that makes you feel comfortable that once Marvin Bagley returns from his injury, that we're probably going to see Nemanja Bjelica move back to a bench role and Rashawn Holmes continue to start in that front court with Marvin Bagley. And so that's interesting to me, and it's also just a neat story because, Rashawn Holmes' mom she's gone on different podcasts before to talk about her son and his kind of trip through becoming an NBA player and through college, and she interacts on Twitter. So I guess Rashawn Holmes is an easy guy to root for because he seems to be emblematic of a grit and grind, hard worker type guy who just, goes out and earns every single statistic that he's out there for.
Yeah, and he 16, 10, 2 steals, and 4 blocks tonight. So one heck of a game. Harrison Barnes had 26, 4 rebounds. He was 3 of 3 from beyond the arc. I have a theory that Harrison Barnes is going to play for another 14 years and end up in all sorts of weird top 20 lists for statistics.
Yeah, and he'll probably end up getting traded onto a couple more championship teams as well.
There you go. And you know what? At 14, I mean, he's what, 26 right now? So he could play till he's 40. I just feel like people think he's so much older than he is, and he's going to end up with some pretty good numbers when his career is over, probably.
Well, at 9 of 11 from the free throw line on Sunday, 3 of 3 from 3-point land, 7 of 8 from the field overall. When you put him in certain, when you give Harrison Barnes a job, he'll do just that job. So now that's not to say that he hasn't been given a bigger job than he should have handled in the past. That's definitely happened too, and that's why you see such disparate numbers from year to year from him. He's had hyper efficient seasons on low usage. He's had high usage, low efficiency seasons. So he's a peculiar player. He doesn't necessarily contribute a lot on the defensive end, at least not stuff you see in the box score. So it's sometimes hard to root for Harrison Barnes the same way you can root for Rashawn Holmes, who's going to go out as a center and get 2 steals and 4 blocks. So just from a base kind of, I guess, appreciation of player. Other things to note from the Kings box score: Bogdan Bogdanovic was back in action after sitting out the previous game with a hamstring issue. The Kings play again on Monday, and Bogdanovic is considered questionable from the perspective that the team wants to see how his hamstring reacts on Monday after playing through Sunday's game, 28 minutes off the bench. Had a great game, 21 points, 7 of 16 from the field, 3 of 9 from 3-point land, 4 rebounds, 4 assists, 1 steal. So at least you don't want a player to hurt themselves further, but anytime a player can play through an injury, to be able to be available for fans to see who have already bought tickets, I think that's awesome.
All right, we're moving on to the Wizards. Bradley Beal led the team in scoring. Big surprise here, Kyle. 20 points, 8 assists, 3 rebounds, no defensive stats. 2 of 6 from beyond the line.
It's super neat to see Bradley Beal continue to play an absurd amount of minutes on this team that seems obviously destined for the lottery. That Scott Brooks is like, hey, look, man, I'm just going to give him as many minutes as he wants to play, and it's the only way I've got a chance or a prayer at winning. So I'm going to keep trying to win, and that's the best way to go about it. So that's fun to see, 40 minutes almost from Bradley Beal nightly right now. And then the increased assist with not having John Wall around, the fact that Bradley Beal is kind of looked at as the primary facilitator as well, even with Isaiah Thomas in the starting lineup. I think that's super neat to see this season.
Yeah, the backcourt in Washington and seeing Beal take over as more of the facilitator this year with Wall out really reminds me a lot of the situation here in Portland with, getting to see CJ finally be the facilitator, a little bit last week.
Yep. Other things from the Wizards side of the ball, Rui Hachimura, and really there's several guys. There's several guys in this rotation that we're seeing get limited after playing bigger roles earlier in the season. This Wizards team has a lot of middling depth that the team wants to get a look at. The team maybe wants to feature so that they can potentially flip them for some kind of asset to continue building towards the future more. So as we see guys like Davis Bertans excel off the bench, like he has in recent games, that's limiting the amount of minutes that we're seeing from a guy like Rui Hachimura or Troy Brown starting at small forward, and having a guy like Jordan McRae show up in his bench role of late, to the point that McRae was in the game at the end of the previous game and is getting quite a bit of minutes here off the bench. So it's just a very obtuse rotation from the Wizards. So it's hard to maybe get a handle on what they're going to do from game to game, but it's also nice to see so many different players having an opportunity to shine, especially a guy like Mo Wagner off the bench behind Thomas Bryant, the starting center.
Any final notes on that game, or you want to move on?
No, sir.
All right. So the next game of the night was the Suns against the Nuggets. The Nuggets get the win 116-104. Nuggets have won 9 of their last 10. The Lakers and the Bucks, the only other teams who have done that. And let's get into the box score a little bit here. Go ahead, take it away, Kyle.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is that Dario Saric finally had a huge game, put up 18 points with a season high 17 rebounds as the starting power forward for the Suns. Frank Kaminsky was starting at center in the front court with Dario Saric. Aaron Baines was still out with his hip flexor issue. Ricky Rubio, the starting point guard, was out due to back spasms for another game. So we got a start or spot start from Tyler Johnson again at point guard. And we got to see, with Tyler Johnson not necessarily playing too well, Elliot Kobo showed up off the bench, got 16 points, 3 or 4 from 3-point range, 6 of 11 field goals overall, 2 rebounds, 4 assists, 1 steal. I like to compare Elliot Kobo to Jamal Murray, so it's cool to me to see this, kind of diametrically, or the dichotomy of the two of them playing against each other in this game.
So what is Akobo's ultimate position in the NBA?
I think you want him at point guard as just a little bit of a bigger point guard. That's like Jamal Murray doesn't look like it, but he's 6'5". So, he's got that little bit of extra size to potentially intimidate.
He's not like slight either. I mean, he's like a pretty...
Yeah, he's pretty yoked.
You wouldn't say stocky, but, he's like, there's something to him.
Yeah. So, and that's kind of that's why I think I compare Elliot Kobo. Plus, Elliot Kobo has the ability to shoot off the dribble the way we see Jamal Murray do. Maybe not quite as inventive with the shots that he takes. But yeah, you're talking about guys in the mold of CJ McCollum, Jamal Murray. That's Elliot Kobo, and it's intriguing to see him playing well off the bench here. And maybe if we continue to see Ricky Rubio miss games, we get a bigger look at Elliot Kobo playing next to our boy Devin Booker, which is the super interesting thing, because if he can excel there, then, and the Suns end up faltering as the season goes, then maybe we do see more of that look of those two together.
The Suns with the loss go to 8-8, so they drop to 500. That is good for 7th in the West. It's kind of nice, the setup right now, because any team that is 500 or over is in the playoffs if it were to start today, and then any team under 500 is out, starting with the Timberwolves being 500 along with the Suns, and then the Kings being the first team out.
So if you were going to pick a team that's out of the standings right now, or out of the 8 that are in the playoffs right now, if you look at the Sacramento Kings, the New Orleans Pelicans, the San Antonio Spurs, who would you say has the best chance of maybe taking over a spot from the Timberwolves or the Suns?
It's hard to go against the Spurs track record. Really, when's the last time the Spurs missed the playoffs? I think I was 7 years old.
The Spurs are 2-8 in their last 10. The Sacramento Kings are 7-3 in their last 10, and the New Orleans Pelicans are 5-5. If you're asking me, I think the Pelicans are the most intriguing, because if they're finally finding their groove now that they opened the season, and I think they had these rose-colored glasses on where they looked at the roster. Alvin Gentry did, and the front office did, and they said, we're going to bring JJ Redick off the bench, which doesn't make any sense. When you sign him to come in and you're building a team that has a lot of guys who can work off the dribble, who are attackers towards the rim, you bring in Zion Williamson, you bring in Brandon Ingram, you have Drew Holiday, you need a shooter around them. Now, maybe you hope that Lonzo Ball is improved and he's going to be a great enough three-point shooter that he can stretch the floor in the way that JJ Redick would, or at least comparable enough. But you can't expect that. And now we're seeing with JJ Redick go out there and stretch the floor so much for the Pelicans. They're playing better. They're going to win more. Having a guy like a role player out there like Kenrich Williams is opening things up for them. And now we also have potentially Zion Williams coming back in the next couple of weeks, or in the next month or so. So if the Pelicans can stay in the range for a playoff spot, and then Zion comes back, he's going to be a player who immediately impacts wins.
They have the highest ceiling, I will say that. I think they have the highest probability, or the highest ceiling. I won't say highest probability, because it's hard, like I said, hard for me to go against the Spurs. Once Popovich figures out the real rotation, that that needs to happen, I guess.
Does Bagley playing over Nemanja Bjelica help or hurt the Kings' chances to win?
In my opinion, I think it hurts it a little bit. I think you want Bagley to get all that he can right now. So this is like the time where he's going to progress the most. So I think he needs to be out there, and I think long term, that's what's best for them.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think that you sacrifice Bagley's development to get
right.
wins now, even if it means you miss the playoffs, because you can blame missing the playoffs this year on the fact that De'Aaron Fox is going to be out for a long time with his ankle sprain. So, so I would, yeah, exactly. I would make sure that Bagley's development stays a key focal point for the team.
Should we move on to our final game of the evening?
Yes, sir.
All right, so we got Pelicans and the Clippers.
Hey, I was already talking about these guys.
That's a great transition. So the Clippers win 134-109 over the Pelicans. And let's take it away with the box score.
I guess I probably shouldn't have spoken so rosy about them and how great JJ Redick is, but he was he had the best plus minus in the starting lineup, so with a +2. So I stand. I think I'm right still.
Corrected? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. This was a rough one for the Pelicans.
I don't know what you're going to take from this blowout, to be completely honest. The Clippers are by far the superior team in this regard. We still got Lonzo Ball coming off the bench, and I think he's going to continue to come off the bench because of the fact that JJ Redick is, I think, intrinsic to what you need if you're going to try and win games with the other guys that are there for the Pelicans. I also think that the fact that Derek Favors continues to miss time is really opening the door to Jackson Hayes potentially just staying in the starting lineup the rest of the season.
Yeah, I think he's going to continually not be a box score guy until he cuts down his fouls, but he does look good out there, as I said the other night.
Yep, I agree. And he's obviously got what you want. Now, if there's one argument to bring Jackson Hayes off the bench is if you end up going out there and you've already got Zion running out on the wing, you've already got Brandon Ingram able to get the ball, rip and run. You've got JJ Redick out there. Like, if it just makes more sense to put Lonzo Ball out there with Jackson Hayes, because Lonzo Ball is that guy who gets the rebound and flips it up the court really quick, and maybe that's the guy that you want out there with Jackson Hayes more. Or maybe you just stagger Jackson Hayes so that he gets a lot of run with Lonzo Ball if Lonzo does get stuck in a backup role the rest of the season while the Pelicans are still fighting for a potential playoff spot.
I'm really glad the way things worked out for the Pelicans right now with their roster. They have one of the most exciting young rosters, top to bottom. We haven't even seen the number 1 overall pick yet. And there's just like a lot to talk about. I know this game is not going to be a highlight for sure, but the thing is, when you have your second unit going up against a second unit like the Clippers, where you have guys like Montrezl Harrell and Lou Williams, that's just how it's going to go. There's not a complete team quite like the Clippers right now. There just isn't.
Oh no, not at all. And the Clippers have so much versatility in regards to the different ways they can match up with every team that they run into, whether it's going big with teams, going small with teams, going super small, going super big. They've got all those options in spades due to the versatility of both their roster as a whole in the different shapes and sizes that they have of players, but also the skill sets that all those players possess. So it's super interesting. I love the fact that we've had now 3 straight games in a row with Kawhi Leonard playing, which is huge. Obviously, he's probably going to be somebody that sits out the back-to-back sets going forward. So that brings Tuesday and Wednesday's games into focus a little bit. The Clippers play at Dallas and then at Memphis Tuesday and Wednesday. You would hope that we get to see Kawhi playing against Luka and really have that test for Luka, where one of Paul George or Kawhi is guarding Luka a lot of the night, and then maybe we see Luka have a bad game for once. But Who knows? Maybe they save Kawhi for the Memphis game, so he can match up with Jaren Jackson and get worked.
I'm interested to see who is going to be the Ruben Patterson to Luka's Kobe.
Yeah, the Kobe stopper, Ruben Patterson. Yeah.
Okay, well, that really wraps up our 5 games from the night. We talked a little about the news. Should we get into our previews for Monday? You said 11 games, is that right?
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. I did forget to mention for the Clippers, Montrezl Harrell off the bench. He tied his career high with 34 points. Also had 12 rebounds, 8 of 10 from the line, 13 of 18 from the field. So raise the roof for Montrezl Harrell. He was dope.
Yeah, he's one of the most fun energy guys to watch, right? Like rim runner energy. Like he's
he seems to have genuine energy or genuine like positive energy. So it's absolutely fun to watch him, go out there and show out and play hard and leave it all out on the court.
All right, so
that was a lot of corny platitudes. Sorry.
We would like him here, right? We like him.
Seems like a good bloke.
Yeah. Okay, what do we got going on Monday?
We got 11 games on Monday. And then we got just 2 on Tuesday and then 14 on Wednesday before getting Thursday off for Thanksgiving. So that'll be nice to be able to go out and have ourselves a nice cocktail on Wednesday, wake up and eat ourselves back to stasis. That'll be nice. And then sleep it off. I think that's the plan for most people. But for Monday's 11 games, got three tipping off right to open the night. Brooklyn at Cleveland is the first one. Kevin Love is questionable with his lower back contusion that held him out of the previous game. He's still got Kyrie Irving out. Dylan Windler still going to be sidelined for the Cavaliers. John Henson's still out with his hamstring/illness. Anything particular from this Brooklyn at Cleveland game? It's a little bit interesting for me just because it's two games potentially missing their best player, and it might be competitive due to the injuries that we have here.
I'm with you there. I think this will be a pretty close game. It's also in Cleveland, so that is I'm not going to give the nod to the Cavs, but I think it will be a close game when it's all said and done.
Yeah, the line is even, so that should be very even.
Ooh, nice.
Orlando at Detroit is the next game. Detroit's projected to win by 4.5. Aaron Gordon is out. Michael Carter-Williams is out. Of course, we still got Nikola Vucevic out for several weeks. Blake Griffin rested the previous game, but he'll be back in action for the Detroit Pistons. Reggie Jackson remains out, of course. And then Tony Snell is also still out for the Pistons. Snell's been out for a couple games now with a hip flexor strain. Pistons have been starting Langston Galloway at small forward or on the wing there with Tony Snell out. Orlando at Detroit. It'll be an interesting game. We've seen Markelle Fultz play a little bit more of an expanded role last game. We saw more offensive touches and shots for Jonathan Isaac with Vucevic being out, with Gordon being out. So it's an interesting new dynamic for Orlando. I love seeing Jonathan Isaac finally getting to show his offensive side of the game, and hopefully we see more of that, though he'll likely have his hands full guarding both Andre Drummond and Blake Griffin, depending on the who's in the game at a given time.
If the Cavs win, they will have 6 wins, which would tie the Magic in the standings. So moving on to the third game of the night.
Memphis at Indiana. The Memphis Grizzlies have Marko Guduric, who doesn't really matter. He's just an end of the rotation guy. Is questionable with right knee soreness.
Tell that to his family. You tell that to his family.
Well, I'm sorry, Marko Guduric's family, but whether or not your dad, father, son plays in Monday's game doesn't really matter that much. They recently got Grayson Allen back, although Grayson Allen wasn't in the rotation last game. And unfortunately, Marko Guduric was, which is a travesty. And I'm sorry, Marko Guduric's family, but he just probably shouldn't be in the NBA.
I like how you doubled down.
I didn't like being called out, to be completely honest. I was trying to be as polite as possible.
I like it.
Malcolm Brogdon, he's probably a great guy, and he seems to hustle. So good for him on all that and mess. Prove me wrong, pal. Malcolm Brogdon, after sitting out a couple games with a lower back issue, he'll be back in action, which means Aaron Holiday should be shifted back to a bench role. Jakar Sampson is doubtful to play. He's got a sore back. Anything from this Memphis at Indiana game that intrigues you? I love seeing some of the shot blocking matchups. We got two bigger front courts with Miles Turner and Domantas Sabonis matching up with Jonas Valanciunas and Jaren Jackson Jr., though we'll probably see a bit of a cross match there.
I'll watch Ja Morant anytime. So
Yes.
you name the team. Doesn't matter to me. Doesn't matter who else is playing and who isn't. But I do like what you're saying about Triple J versus the Pacers front court. So that will be exciting as well.
Oh, and Ja Morant in his previous game had a career high 5 steals. So maybe we'll see him be a pest to Malcolm Brogdon in this one.
And we have what, 4:30? I'm sorry, I'm on the West Coast, so it's hard for me. I always forget anytime you and I say a time. Who knows where our listeners are listening? So, but I guess we have 4 other games tipping off a half hour after the first set.
Yep. The first one here is Minnesota at Atlanta. I'm sure somebody just heard my Midwest accent by me saying Minnesota.
That was thick.
Minnesota at Atlanta. We'll have Robert Covington back after being away from the team the previous game for personal reasons. Josh Okogie is questionable. Treveon Graham is questionable. Shabazz Napier is doubtful. He's been doubtful with hamstring issue for several games, has been out for several games. On the Atlanta side of things, Cam Reddish is questionable with his wrist injury. Reddish has missed the last couple games, and we've seen DeAndre Bembry getting the spot start there at shooting guard for them. With Covington back, that should mean that we see, sugar plums. Jarrett Culver might move back to the bench, I'm guessing. But it really depends on what happens with Treveon Graham. Treveon Graham did not start the previous game. He was quote unquote available, but didn't actually play. It was like an emergency situation. So a little bit in flux with this Minnesota and Atlanta game. I'm intrigued by the Trae Young and Karl Anthony Towns aspect of it. Wish we had John Collins there to match up with Karl Towns, though. But obviously, we do not due to Collins still being out on suspension.
Yep, and the T-Wolves sitting at 8-8 at that in the 8th spot in the West. So the win keeps them above 500 and keeps them in a potential playoff spot. Next game.
The next game is sugar plums. I lost it. Sorry about that. Philadelphia at Toronto. Furkan Korkmaz for the Sixers and Kyle O'Quinn for the Sixers are both questionable. On the Toronto side of things, we've got Serge Ibaka listed as doubtful with his sprained ankle. We heard that Ibaka was maybe going to be able to return for Saturday's game, so it's a little bit, this is why teams don't give you expectations for when a player is going to return, because then you start to think like, well, why isn't he returning? He must have gotten hurt, or he must have this or that. And whether it's probably just like the Toronto Raptors going, you know what, he's not ready. We thought he'd be ready. He's not ready. We're not going to risk it. We're going to bring him back when he's healthy. So
I view this as the game of the night. What do you think? We got 2 of the top 4 Eastern Conference teams, 2 important playoff teams. You had Kawhi last year on the Raptors hitting the big shot. He's gone now. Sixers looking for some revenge potentially. And the Raptors trying to show that they're not as bad without Kawhi as people want to believe.
Yeah, no, I definitely want to see Siakam and Fred VanVleet fighting against this. Joel Embiid, Al Harrington, Josh Richardson, Tobias Harris, Ben Simmons. What a team! Oh, that is an exciting starting lineup. Yeah, it's going to be hopefully a really good game. On the Toronto side of things, hopefully OG Anunoby gets out of the funk he's had the last game or two. But we've seen Rondé Hollis-Jefferson playing well off the bench, and that's allowed the Raptors to look past Anunoby. And I don't want to see that. I love Anunoby's potential. I think he's got that upside to be an all-star. So I hate seeing stumblings in his development, especially when he got off to such a nice start to open the season.
Yeah, Anunoby is one of my players to watch for sure on the season. Whoever wins that game will have the second most wins behind the Bucks in the East. So that is a pretty important game, and another reason why I think it is going to be the game of the night.
Oh wow, it is really packed in there in the East. After the Bucks, with 1, 2, 3, 4 teams all having 11 wins. Wow, sardine.
Yeah, so you're kind of in the, I don't want to say the driver's seat, but I don't know.
Oh
Maybe
yeah, oh yeah.
you're in the cockpit.
Oh, the Bucks are by far the best team just because they have the most consistency from the 2 seasons, and plus the Bucks have been remarkably healthy, knock on wood, so far.
That's right, and such a deep team that added a trio of veterans that have made it a pretty complete team. So moving on to another, let's go with the Hornets and Heat.
Oh yeah, yep. Charlotte at Miami. Miami is projected to win by 10.5 in this game. Uh, that makes sense also because Miami got worked in their previous game. So by the Sixers, by Josh Richardson, the former player. So the they're not going to want to be losing a second game in a row, especially with it coming against the Charlotte Hornets. The Miami's going to look at this as almost a must-win game for them, and I think that's why we're seeing the 10.5 line against the Hornets.
Jimmy's out for blood.
Jimmy's out for blood. Next game is the Sacramento Kings at the Boston Celtics. Bogdan Bogdanovic, as we mentioned earlier, talking about the Kings, he's going to be questionable for this one until they assess how his hamstring feels after playing on Sunday. Marvin Bagley remains out. Trevor Ariza is out with a groin issue. And then Kemba Walker is doubtful with a neck sprain after he had a scary little collision this weekend. So if you didn't hear about it before, Kemba Walker was kind of moving across the middle of the paint or the side of the paint and ended up running his head into one of his team or Shemi Ojule's stomach. Shemi Ojule is a brick crap house of a person, just yoked beyond all measure, and it jammed Kemba's neck. He was laying on the court for an extended period of time. They ended up taking him off on a stretcher. He went to the hospital, got checked out for concussion. Seems to have passed all the concussion tests. So now it's just the team's just being cautious before saying that he's going to be ready to play and come back. I think there's if Kemba wakes up fine on Monday, I think there's a decent chance he actually plays on Monday for Boston. But maybe they'll go the safe route and just hold him out for another game or two.
I imagine he wants to get back out there just for himself to make sure everything's okay as quickly as possible. So, but the team will always err on the side of caution.
It's a scary injury, but once you get through it, and if you're fine, you're fine. So it's like if your neck's not fine, you'd know.
Right. Yeah. Then it's mental, right?
Yeah, exactly. And if you can do everything, then you're probably good. Anyways. Next game, Portland at Chicago. Hassan Whiteside is probable, and that's super interesting for the Trailblazers because they've been struggling of late, and we've already seen Damian Lillard return to action for them in their previous game after he missed a couple games with back issues. Lillard's still supposedly dealing with these back spasms, or this back tightness, but he's just planning on playing through it. And hopefully it'll work itself out there. It doesn't seem that there's anything structural. Otherwise, the Trailblazers wouldn't be letting him play through it. It's interesting to get Hassan Whiteside back because of the Carmelo Anthony thing. Like, it's hard to judge this team being competitive at all, even though the Trailblazers got worked by the Cavs in their previous game, a Cavs team that didn't have Kevin Love. You still want to give some apologies to the Trailblazers or excuses to them until they get a legitimate center in there, because how much can you really expect from a front court of Anthony Tolliver at center and Carmelo Anthony against the Cavs and against the Bucks? It's like you can't expect much.
I think Markkanen's going to break out of his slump and have his best game of the season tomorrow night.
How perfect would that be against Carmelo? Since I am a Carmelo kind of hater, I would enjoy that. That's
my prediction for the evening.
Oh my gosh, I love it. Yeah, I don't know. I think this is a perfect opportunity for the Trailblazers to get a win against a team that is coming off a high point to the point that like there might be you're coming off the sugar high. There's going to be a letdown or a lull after Zach LaVine scored a career high 49 points in the previous game. This is another even line here with this Portland at Chicago game. We might have a bunch of really nice games, a bunch of competitive games on Monday. So that's interesting. It's also going to make for a hectic Monday with 11 games on the slate.
Yeah, very true. But it will be a fun night at least.
Holla, holla.
So we also got the Jazz coming to Milwaukee to take on the Bucks.
Yep, Rudy Gobert is questionable in this one, which is unfortunately, I mean, it's unfortunate because when the Jazz list players is questionable, there's a legitimate 50-50 chance that they're not going to play. And that's not true with all teams. So this is hopefully we have Rudy out there. You know, has the Jazz been good against the Bucks lately? Because I would imagine that, especially last season with Brook Lopez being able to stretch the floor, that would kind of take Gobert out of things a little bit, wouldn't it?
I don't think the Bucks have won. I know that the game's in Milwaukee, but the Bucks haven't won in Utah in years.
Okay.
So they do struggle against Utah. Here's the thing, though, with the Bucks. Although they are playing really well, they've had a good record. They've had a tough schedule by many metrics, but they keep tending to miss other teams' top superstar when they play teams. So if you look at some of the players and teams that they've missed, that this would fall in line pretty well if Gobert is not able to play. Even as a Bucks fan, I want Gobert to play. I want to see them play against the Jazz at their best, and that's always going to make the most aesthetically entertaining game. So
yeah, absolutely. And don't the Jazz use Gobert as a defender on Giannis more, since Giannis isn't necessarily Giannis is going to come into the paint most of the time.
Yeah, and Gobert has had, I mean, you just look
at
it.
I think he's had pretty good success doing that.
Guarding Giannis. So those guys play hard against each other, and they take a punishment, as you would expect. So another reason why you'd like to see Gobert out there.
All right, the Los Angeles Lakers at the San Antonio Spurs. Anthony Davis is listed as probable with his right shoulder soreness that he's been playing, but he played through both games of the back-to-back set this weekend, so you'd imagine that Davis is going to be fine, unless the Lakers look at the San Antonio Spurs team and decide that they just don't need to play their best player, which is possible. Alex Caruso is questionable with the right calf strain. He sat out the previous game. Avery Bradley remains out. DeJounte Murray on the Spurs side of things will be back in action. He sat out the previous game. That was the second game of a back-to-back set. So now he should be back in the starting lineup, but it'll be interesting to see if there are any other changes to the starting lineup, or if DeJounte just pushes Derek White back to a bench role here.
The Lakers have won 7 games in a row, trying to make it 8 in San Antonio.
Oh, yeah. The Lakers are just, I mean, it wasn't hard to imagine that a team with LeBron and Anthony Davis would decimate other teams. So it's just it's nice to have confirmation.
Yes. Oh yeah.
Final game of the night is probably. I mean, I hope this one isn't on national TV. Oklahoma City at Golden State Warriors. I guess they were thinking Paul George and Russell Westbrook versus. Was that still an option at the time? I don't know. I don't think that was even an option when they scheduled this.
I think it would have been just Westbrook versus the Warriors kind of thing.
Nerlens Noel is questionable after having an illness keep him out of the previous game. Draymond Green is questionable after right heel soreness has kept him out of the 2 previous games. This could be a super interesting game. I'm always intrigued to watch any Thunder contest this season, just because of Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. Hopefully Nerlens Noel is healthy, because I like to watch his kind of defense from the Golden State side of things. It'll be interesting to see that if Draymond returns, if the team decides to keep Kai Bowman in at point guard, or if Draymond goes back to playing the point guard spot for them. But other than that, it's hard to see too much of gross implications from this game. I guess one final thing I'll be looking forward to is the fact that maybe we see Darius Bazley play more minutes simply because this game could get ugly if Golden State doesn't get off to a good start.
Draymond at point guard is really the saving grace in terms of watchability for the Warriors, other than having some good young pieces. But really, that's something that's a draw to me, at least.
Oh yeah, I mean it's okay and it's fun to watch Eric Pascal and Jordan Poole in some respects, but it's not. I mean, no, man. There's not. Yeah, and the one interesting thing from this situation is if sugar plums. I thought we were going to see Kevon Looney return for this game, or I know there was the possibility of Kevon Looney returning from Monday's game, so it's a little bit disconcerting to see him still listed as being out for another couple games. It looks like there's a report on Sunday that Looney will miss a couple more games, so that's disappointing. I was hoping he would be back in action because not a huge fan of Willie Cauley-Stein in the front court. Plus, there was this whole notion that Looney was going to be stepping into a bigger role this year, and with so many guys out, he definitely has that opportunity. Anyways, don't need to spend much more time talking about Kevon Looney.
All right. Well, I'm gonna wrap things up with a little trivia question for you. So we had the Knicks and Nets play the New York rivalry. So I'm gonna read a lyrics from a song by two New York musicians or artists, whatever you want to call them. And I'm just gonna read a lyric, and I would like you to guess who the artists, either one of them, are. Okay.
Okay. Might want to just go back a little bit. Just a little loud.
Oh, okay. Thanks.
Sorry. Yeah, bro. Teamwork, bro.
Teamwork makes the dream work.
Thanks for dealing with my crappy mic situation right now.
Hey, no worries. All right. So here's the lyric. In New York, concrete jungle where dreams are made of, there's nothing you can't do. Now you're in New York. These streets will make you feel brand new. Big lights will inspire you. Let's hear it for New York.
That's the Alicia Keys song, right?
Yeah.
Or okay, yeah. Take it to the rack like Jerry Stack, son.
Oh, well done. All right, so it's Jay-Z and Alicia Keys.
I don't like that song.
I didn't know. I didn't think you'd get it on the first try. So well done.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh no, I hate that chorus. So
that's why
when you were saying it to me, I was like, oh man, ouch. Trigger warning.
Yeah.
Crappy songs.
All right. Well, any final notes before we wrap up the show?
You got any Fleetwood Mac lyrics that have basketball in it? I'm sure Stevie Nicks was way into the NBA.
Yes, I'll look into that for Monday Night Show.
Okay, thanks.
All right. I am Anthony Denu. You can find me on Twitter at Anthony Denu, and join with me is Kyle. Kyle, thanks for being with me tonight.
Hey, Anthony, thanks for having me on. You can find me on Twitter at RotoKyleNBA, and you can Venmo me coffee money at Kyle McKeown 16.
All right, folks, have a wonderful evening, and we'll catch you Monday night for the Monday night, Tuesday night games. Have a wonderful evening.
Love you.